So, okay,
Great.
go on, Mark.
So good
Get
morning,
started.
everybody. This is our grand experiment. Not my wheelhouse, but we like the idea of doing this. So just very quickly, the genesis of this idea. For the last few years, most if not all of you know that I've been teaching privately these color and design workshops here in my studio in Benicia. And in doing so, we've created a wonderful community of artists, a vibrant and ongoing community of artists. And that's been really the most gratifying part of the workshops is this growing community. And so it was suggested to us that we expand this beyond the Bay Area and beyond the physical nature of the studio. And that's led us to trying this more ephemeral experiment. So let's get started. So this is our getting started, but I want to at some point drill down to the getting started part of the creative process. And in doing so, I brought in a couple of my favorite people. One is Agnes Martin, so I'm going to start with a quote, if you'll indulge me. This is a poem that Agnes Martin wrote, and here we go. She says here that the adventurous state of mind is a high house, and to enjoy life, the adventurous state of mind must be grasped and maintained. The key part here, I think, is maintaining. The essential feature of adventure, she says, is that it's a going forward into unknown territory, and that the joy of adventure is unaccountable. And she says here that this is the attractiveness of artwork. It is adventurous, it is strenuous, and it is joyful. So I like that idea of adventure. And when I speak with my students at CCA, I'll ask them about, have any of you had any really memorable adventures? And before we even go into that discussion, the discussion is, well, what is the nature of adventure? And the feedback is interesting. It's usually a moment where we don't know what's going to happen. Adventure oftentimes is exciting, but also a little scary because it is, as Agnes says, unknown. Yeah. And that unknown territory is a little daunting. Last night when I was going over notes with Maria about what we're going to discuss about getting started, I thought about this metaphor or an analogy for how different people enter into this adventure or the unknown in different ways. Imagine, for instance, you're at a lake, it's summertime, it's early morning, you've just had your breakfast, and you decide to go for a swim. But let's say that the lake is just a little chilly. It's not quite warm enough. Well, everyone goes into that lake differently. Some people test it with their toes and realize this is chilly water, so they're going to take it really slowly up to the ankles, and they stand there for a while, etc. And others will just literally realize, okay, it's chilly, it's going to be bracing, but I'm just going to run and jump and dive. And I think
it changes with age.
And it changes with age, right? So I think this is a good analogy for what artists encounter in their work. Some people are very methodical. They have a real strong sense at the outset what they want to do. And so their entry into the unknown is just that. It's methodical, it's careful, it's planned. Sometimes it's more cautious, if you will. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, some people just dive in and just create complete chaos, knowing that somewhere along the line, they're going to find their way into the work and it's going to make sense. I also made notes here, if you'll bear with me for just referring to the notes. Vincent van Gogh, wrote a wonderful letter of many to his brother Theo, and he said, "Dear Theo, you have no idea the sheer terror of staring at the blank canvas and having it stare back at you and say to you, you don't know anything." That always gets a laugh. But he goes on with the next sentence, which is the true artist dares to start. It just begins. And I've always liked that as well, because I think part of this notion of adventure and going into the unknown that always has to be addressed is fear and the nature of fear. It's always present. Agnes Martin actually writes about fear quite a bit. She says that there's many kinds of fear. I know that when I'm teaching with students at CCA, they're fearful of what others will think of them when the work is in process or we do the group critique. So there's this idea of comparison. There's this idea of I don't want to fail. It's one thing to fail in the quietude of your own studio, in your own privacy. It's a whole other matter to to fail in the presence of others. So I think that's an interesting situation. But
I think that would be a good moment to just check in with people and see if you relate to that. So you can type in the chat, just to make sure that you are here with us. Do you relate to that fear of being judged and getting the work out there?
Yeah, or the fear of the work being seen and you're just not sure if it's ready to be seen or good enough.
Yeah.
And I think, this is this notion of fear of
always
of failure is always there, and it's all kinds of.
It's good enough. 100%. There you go. Yeah. So it's a common thing.
So yeah, we have this, but I think even setting aside what others think about our work or about us, when you're in the studio working and you're getting started, there is that unknown. There is that blank canvas, let's say. And my own feeling, my own process is to begin with, how shall I say, I begin mostly with abandon. This is the best way. I work with abandonment, knowing in the very beginning of the work, anything is possible. I can use the most audacious colors or not. I can make a lot of moves. The wrinkles that happen, the scratches and tears that are so-called accidental, I don't mind them. In fact, I invite them. It doesn't really matter. Why? Because I know doggone well that this thing is going to go through a journey, just like any adventure. And that the beginning of the beginning is just filled with possibilities. And I can work with abandon in the beginning, knowing that at some point I'll stop and I'll sit back and I'll look and go, okay, now what's going on here? What is it that's happening? And that's also part of the process. So at this point, I want to bring in another of my friends, if you will. This is Raymond Carver. I like to read from different sources.
So before you read,
yes,
can
please.
I maybe just ask a question?
Sure.
Because it's interesting, and I see people here are sharing their thoughts that, yes, it's scary to put your work out there, and it's the fear of being out there and facing the world and the critique and the judgment. Yeah. But yesterday when we were talking, you also mentioned the fear of just getting started in your studio because there is a certain fear of perfection. Yeah. And it kind of freezes you a little bit. You want to start. And sometimes I remember when I used to do more art, let's say I would get a precious piece of paper or a good canvas. And I'm like, oh my God, I really want this to be perfect because I have this expensive piece of paper or a really good canvas and I don't want to mess it up and I don't want to be just doing anything. So that would completely freak me out. And I could not treat it as, butcher paper and just putting something on it. And I would get so many good drawings on the butcher paper and I just would be horrible.
Because it was cheap material.
Right.
And you could let go.
Right. So the fear of facing you inside your own studio and facing your own work and mark on that canvas or board or whatever it is. Can you talk about that?
Yeah,
is that scary to you?
No, well, you bring up to me a really interesting point, which is this idea that people oftentimes, and I can fall into this trap, if you will, of putting a lot of weight behind what we do, whether it's a given brush work, a given shape, a given color. And this notion of perfection is a tricky one. So again, I just had a critique with a student the other day and we looked at her work and I felt that when I looked at the work and she told me where she thought she was in the piece, we had this whole conversation about are you in the beginning of the piece? Are you in the middle of the piece? Are you at the end of the piece? Well, she was showing me some work and I thought the work was done, because it had all its little beautiful details and precious moments. And she said, no, it's really more at the end of the beginning phase. It's heading towards the beginning of the middle. And I said, well, this is a problem, I think, because you've got all these little precious areas. And what are you going to do? Are you going to leave them? You're going to get rid of them? So the point here is, one way of thinking about this is, I have a note to myself on my wall. It says, begin as a stonemason, end as a jeweler. In other words, I like to work in broad general fashion in the beginning. This is just me, my way of working. And I think it's useful for, especially my students, they're always trying to get to the details of things way too soon. And then there's this great fear, again, fear of obliterating or eliminating or toning down those precious areas. And this is this idea of perfection. I made a perfect move. Why would I want to change it? How can I change it? Well, the problem is if you make 10 different perfect, so-called perfect moves, and they're all fighting with each other, what is one to do? So then you enter into this dialogue about hierarchy of importance. So yeah, this notion of perfection throughout the whole process is a tricky one. I don't personally feel that I make any so-called perfect moves for quite a while in the work. I'm making a lot of imperfect moves. I'm being thoughtful. I'm trying to be thoughtful in the beginning to middle phase, but I'm also really clear and aware that things are going to change. Things are going to change. And if I'm trying to be too perfect too soon, it's very painful. I remember once my first teacher, Fred Holley, I was 18 years old, starting to learn to paint with oils. And I was working from the model. The model was up there, and I'm painting away. Been at it for a while. And Fred came over to me, and he took my brush out of my hand because he's old school, which I love. And he says, I'll tell you what, because I was stumped. He could tell I was stumped. I was frozen, didn't know what to do. I made all these precious areas. And Fred goes up and he says, look, I'm going to take this brush here. Now, I'm not going to do what my teacher did to me. I said, well, what did he do to you? He said, well, he took the brush in your situation. He charged it with white paint, and he put an X on the precious area that was clearly your stumping part. He said, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to show you how I can change that little so-called precious area. So again, it comes back to fear, the idea of being perfect in our moves, and that can...
So what would be your piece of advice, if I can say so, for people who face that fear? I mean, I'm going to say we, because I used to do art, so I remember that feeling. And we all have to face it because it's, I think, human also to have a little bit of that fear and insecurity. So after doing this for 50 years,
yes.
If you could give one bit of advice to people who are maybe struggling more than others, or for people who are starting to paint and are not sure always of what they're doing.
The word that came up into my head, Maria, when you asked that question is momentum. So this is also a note to myself today about talking about momentum. So I think if we have momentum, let's say instead of just working on one piece, I'm working on 2 or 3 pieces at once. There's a momentum that gets started, and I feel like every move I make is going to be okay, whether it's a good move or not so great move, because I have other pieces in the wings that I can bring out. I think that if you have some kind of momentum, whether you're in the beginning of the piece, the middle, or the end, that helps a lot with the decision-making process. What stays, what goes. But then also there's that balance of stepping back and observing and just looking, which is a huge part of painting. I think a lot of people don't do that.
So your advice would be just do it? Just do it?
Well,
keep on doing it.
I'm thinking of
it gets better.
It gets better. Just keep doing it. Yeah, it's the Nike thing. Well, you're making me think now of Chuck Close, and when we were talking about inspiration. So this is another part of it too. This whole issue of inspiration. We could talk for an hour just on that.
I think that could be a separate subject.
It's a separate subject, but it ties in because if we're inspired by any given moment, we just act. We can still pause, reflect, but when we're inspired to do something, we do that something. The problem is, I think so many people wait for inspiration. It's going to land on their shoulder from high above. And Chuck Close, one of my favorite painters, says that inspiration is for amateurs, which means you just get into the studio and you do the work, and you're going to make tons of mistakes along the way. And I was just watching a wonderful video on Christopher Brown the other day, painting, and he talks about that. Lots of mistakes, lots of changes. You have to be willing to put it through the paces. You have to be willing to put the damn thing through paces.
So where are you with your momentum? Do you have it or not, like right now, today?
Yeah.
If you're thinking, oh, I'm going to go into the studio, do you feel like you have the momentum with you? Like the force is with you today or not? Are you in the stuck period or in the flowing period? Where are you? And type it in the chat. Let's see. And no momentum.
So it's
hierarchy. How do you rank what you see, color composition value? Well, that's one of the subjects in your color and design workshops, actually, about hierarchy. And I think that's a subject to itself. that we could talk about in one of these episodes.
In one of these chats. Yeah, real quickly on the issue of hierarchy, if all the components are screaming for attention, there is no hierarchy. If all the actors that come on a stage want the main roles and everyone's chatting or talking, then there's cacophony. If the orchestra that's playing decides that they're going to mutiny from the conductor, there's cacophony. So you cannot have everything screaming for attention. Actors on a stage, some get the big lines and some stand around like furniture. And so
I like how people are chiming in, so you can really, you know,
I'm going to be looking here. So
yeah, no, I know, but it's great because you guys are talking to amongst yourself as well. And in a few minutes, we're going to connect a few of you if you have something to share. If you see the raise hand button on the bottom of your screen, you can click on it, and that will hopefully give us a sign here that you want to participate, so we can unmute your microphone and you can chime in. So that's going to be in a few minutes. So kind of play a little bit with your screen here, and options on the bottom should open. You don't have, okay, some people don't see it. So if you want, you can also type in the chat. If you don't see the raise hand button, you just type in your chat and say, you know, like raise your hand, or I want to ask or share something. So we'll have also the list of people who want to chime in. Maybe we will not have the time to connect everyone, but feel free to type in the chat.
That will be in about 5 minutes or so, give or take. So. We're going to open it up. Did you want to do
your reading from the other book?
I did, but I wanted to get back to just a moment on hierarchy because someone asked the question. And so I think in future chats, we can really drill down on some of the important elements of design. But one of them is visual weight. That's one of the important elements. And visual weight can be anything from a color, an area, a shape, a brush stroke. But each thing that happens on the canvas, each move, whether it's a brush stroke or a shape, has its own visual weight, from very, very small to very heavy. For instance, a very thin line that can barely be seen has hardly any visual weight. However, a very thick line has a much more presence that has a visual weight. Color. If you have an area of neutral color, that may be a very quiet area. But if you've got a bold area of color, let's say red, that's going to have a strong visual weight. Well, with that in mind, if you have, let's say in a given painting, the same red being used everywhere, or it's competing with bright oranges and blues and yellows, it becomes very challenging to have an orchestration of color that's unified, because everything is screaming, look at me, look at me, look at me.
But that's way after we get started.
That's way after we get started. So
we're not talking about the start anymore. We're
we're talking about process. Yes, he's keeping me on track. Thank you.
Go back to the beginning.
Yes. But even in getting...
But you wanted to mention, and I want to also share this with the people listening to us here. You were mentioning yesterday about the beginning, the middle, and the end of the beginning. And I think with that, we could finish
the conversation.
Yeah, do the reading, and then let someone else talk a little bit.
So I learned this wonderful way of thinking from a dear friend of mine, Larry McClary, and colleague who taught for many years at CCA. He just retired after 50 years. And I went to one of Larry's seminars and worked with him privately. And he explained to me the 3 important phases of a painting. And I've mentioned this in an interview with Nick Wilton. So I'll give you a very abbreviated version right now, but it's so useful to artists to know, where am I in the piece? Am I on the risk of overworking this piece? How to get started. So very quickly, there is a beginning and a middle and an end to the creative process. Very briefly, in the beginning, anything's possible. Typically, our moves are very large and broad. We're just getting started in the beginning.
Yeah, I
just
think
getting started.
Like Aaron said here, which I really like, is that the blank canvas is my favorite time of the painting because I can do anything. Sky is the limit.
That's right. And that's the beauty of the beginning. Yeah. And so it's like entering that lake. You just run and dive. You don't have to stick your toe in there. You just do it. And then all of a sudden something happens and it takes you somewhere, which is my final quote is the act of discovery. So this is from Raymond Carver, and he's talking about writing, but it applies to the visual arts. And he says that in an essay, simply called Writing Short Stories, the great Southern writer Flannery O'Connor, she talks about writing as an act of discovery. Well, painting's an act of discovery. life is an act of discovery. And O'Connor says that she most often did not know where she was going when she sat down to work on a short story. She says that she doubts that many writers know where they are going when they begin something. And that's perfect. We don't know where we're going when we start the adventure. It's into the unknown territory. That is the nature of getting started.
And one of your students said it really beautifully in one of the color and design workshops, and it really stuck with me. And I think with other students being in that group, Corey, he said, I don't have to know where I'm going, but I need to know what I'm doing.
Right. And the two go hand in hand, right?
I really love that.
So I'm seeing lots of comments here. Great. I'm unfortunately paying attention to the screen here, but Maria is taking a good look. So do we open this up now at some point?
Yeah, so if anyone would like to chime in.
Cheers.
I think that Kathleen could not find a button. So Kathleen, would you like me to unmute you now so you can
unleash?
Yeah, speak to us.
There, Kathleen.
You can type in the chat if you wanted to say something. Sure. Okay, here we go. So
this is from Kathleen Flores, who's up in the great Northwest. Kathleen used to live here.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Yes. Fantastic. Hi, Kathleen.
Oh, that is so cool.
Someone else, guys, can you hear Kathleen now when she's speaking? Just making sure that this audio is working. Yes. Okay.
Great. Beautiful. Hi, Kathleen. What's up?
Great. Great. Well, I'm just very happy that you're doing this. This is great. We're looking forward to seeing you up here this summer. And it would be nice, you know, I do this with the Zen Center in Vallejo. We have a Zoom conference each month, and so I'm used to this format. So, and somebody had typed in, just for others, somebody had typed in that if you click on the participants button on the bottom, then now I can see another window that says raise hand. So. So I could have done that. So I just wanted to say hi. This is great. Thank you very much.
Also, I just want to note to everyone that I'm good friends with Kathleen. She lived here in Benicia for many years, wonderful artist, who then moved up to the Northwest. And it's through Kathleen that we're able to go up to the Northwest to Port Townsend in August to do a 3-day color and design workshop. So I owe Kathleen a lot of thanks for that, and we'll be seeing you when we come back.
Yeah, that'll be great. So I look forward to it, and I'd love to know the books you're referring to.
Oh, great. Yeah. One is called one's Raymond Carver. It's a compilation. It's essays, poems, and stories. It's a wonderful compilation by him. The other book is Agnes Martin. Let me show her this. Yeah. And this is Writings or Schriften. That book is out of print, but you can go online and see lots of her quotes and stories and poems.
Okay, thank you.
Two of my favorites. Yeah, thank you. So, who else?
Thank you, Kathleen. So let's see if there's anyone else who wants to chime in and to come to Canada. Hoping we can get you to come to Canada.
Hello, Diane. Wonderful. Well, send us an invite. We're open to traveling.
Yes.
So I'm seeing lots of replies. These are great.
Yeah, and you will get to read them.
Okay.
After.
I'm wondering, is Sam, my friend up in Mendocino, is that Sam Waldman? I'm seeing a name Sam, but I'm not sure. So I was just wondering if that's Sam Waldman. Oh no, I'm certain.
We're still discovering this platform, as you can see.
Right. So if we're having whatever technical difficulties, or you are not able to do what we're suggesting, please email us. Should I give everyone my email?
Sure.
So my email address is mark@markeanes.com. That's EANES. mark@markeanes.com. And I don't know if, by the way, I might as well mention the newsletter too. We have a monthly newsletter, so that lets people know what we're doing, what we're up to in terms of shows and workshops. But if there's any difficulty that you're having getting a hold of us or speaking with this platform, please let us know so we can work on it, because this is brand new.
Yeah. So how do you feel doing this?
It's funny. I went into this with some trepidation, because I'm old school for one, and the last standing Luddite, as I like to say. But this is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. In fact, it's really great to have you here next to me. It's hold my hand, hold my virtual hand. But yeah, this idea of broadening the community excites me, and I think when I start seeing and hearing other people on the screen, it's going to get even more exciting. Right now, I'm reading things, but once we get that figured out, or people participate, live. But no, I'm excited by the potential. I'm excited by the potential. Good. We want to do this on a regular basis.
Thank you, Aaron, for encouraging us.
What did Aaron say?
You're doing great.
Okay, great.
All right.
Kathleen says it really helps to have the visual of everyone at the top of the screen. It makes you feel more connected. So I agree with that. Do we know how to do that yet?
Well, I think that this is what we're referring to. Yeah.
But right now we don't see them.
Well, we don't see the videos, but you see who's here. You see the names.
I see.
So since we have time, if anyone else wants to chime in and say something, please send us a little note in the chat, or if you can find that button to raise hand under manage participants.
Yes, we still have a good 20 minutes or more, so we're happy. There's Kathleen.
But we had a... Hey. So hold on. We see your video, but we don't hear you. Did you want to say something? Let me unmute you. Okay, here we go. Try now.
Hi, what I did was I just typed start video on the bottom of my screen.
Okay.
So maybe if everybody does that, maybe we have to do it on our end.
Oh, to have everyone's video. But we were a little bit scared about having everyone's video for two reasons. One reason was the Wi-Fi connection. I don't know how much Wi-Fi power we would need to stream all these videos. So we were like scared that everything would start getting, like frozen and we would have bad audio. And the other thing is that not everyone is comfortable with videos. So, people should have the option to turn their video on if they feel comfortable and they want to. But if they want to just hug their cup and be in their pajamas and have messy hair, then they can do that in their own privacy and we don't have to scare them off. So
yeah, and they can do that at the bottom of the screen. It looks like I can turn it off and on myself, and then
well, we could
if we have others and they're muted, there is Susan. Hi, Susan. Right. So this is great because now I can see people.
Yes, and so but the only thing I don't want is to have all the audios on at the same time, because then everyone wants to say something and then it gets...
Well, can we control that from our end?
Yes.
Okay, so great.
So we'll do one at a time.
So we'll mute Kathleen for a moment if that's okay. And we'll say hi to Susan, who just came on. Hi, Susan.
All right.
Okay. Hello, guys. This is
hi.
great.
How nice to meet you virtually.
Nice to meet you virtually too.
We'll be seeing you in real life soon.
Yes. Yeah. Coming to Italy. Really looking forward to it.
Yes. Anything you have to share, or questions, or thoughts, or comments?
No, not really. I think now right now, I'm not hesitant to share my work at all, talking about, fear.
Right.
Starting is no problem.
Yeah.
But that whole big middle chunk, it's endless struggle. And maybe it always is. Like, I think maybe that's the comment maybe I wanted to talk about. I mean, maybe you're not learning anything if it's not a struggle. Maybe you're not growing. I
think struggle is absolutely part and parcel of what we do, and without it, I don't think we do good work. Yeah. I think I mean, if you think about it, the flip side of that coin of not struggling is to be complacent. Right. So complacency, I think, is just the death knell of an artist. Working as though everything is going to be fine always. One of my favorite quotes, I have many, is the Martha Graham, the wonderful dancer and choreographer, said to her dancers, learn to embrace the blessed unrest and the divine dissatisfaction. And so that's what we live with. We live with the blessed unrest and a divine dissatisfaction. And to do less than that is to be complacent. It's a wonderful quote, isn't it? It is. It's a wonderful quote. I'm always, I shouldn't say always, but much of the time I'm restless in the studio. Yeah. And it's a blessing and a curse. I don't know how else to say it.
Right.
And I think many people agree, because I see a lot of comments in the chat like, yeah, I'm really good at this struggle. Yeah, I got the struggle down. So everybody.
Yeah, and then sometimes if you paint something, you become, maybe you have a success, or you think it's a successful painting.
Yes.
And you try to replicate it. It's not satisfying.
Right.
Without the struggle, maybe no satisfaction either, as much as you might want to avoid it.
And I think part of the struggle, at least for me, is, you talked about the middle section, Susan. So for me, part of the struggle is arriving at the middle and realizing that I'm heading towards the end, but there's so much more to do. And those choices that I have to make to get to the end phase become a little more critical, because it's not like the beginning where you can make vast, quick changes without pain, because you've been at it for a while. The moment we invest a lot of time and a lot of energy, we're less likely to make the necessary big changes. We can make small changes, but making the big changes in the middle phase becomes a little more painful, even more painful in the end phase. Because if you make a big move in the end and you screw it up, you're back to the middle, or maybe even further back, who knows?
And this is great, because it ties to, Sheila de la Cruz was asking, will you say a little bit more about the 3 phases of a painting? So I think that this is kind of hopefully answering that question, and you can type in the comments, Sheila, just if that helps.
So just to take that, I'll address Sheila's comment just a little bit and stay with you for a moment, Susan. So the beginning phase is filled with possibility. It's anything goes. There's chaos leading to order. We'll just
And I need some order. Yeah.
There we go. And the middle phase is where things are starting to coalesce, come together. There's more of a sense of order. We begin to find ourselves pausing a little bit more, looking at the work between our moves. We slow down just a little bit in the middle, because things are beginning to make sense. And yet there's lots to be done. Me personally, I'm always turning my canvas to disorientate myself, change the orientation. That helps me see it with fresh eyes, which is helpful. Stepping back, of course, using a little handheld mirror will reverse and shrink the image. That helps us to see it objectively. I'm even using my phone now as a camera. That helps me to see it objectively.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
But then in the end phase,
not to mention using me to see.
And not to use, she's got great eyes. It's really painful at times. But then the end phase is marked by a real slowing down, much more time looking, less time doing. It's a time where you may spend days deciding what the next or final moves are. So the end phase is really marked by a slowing down, oftentimes taking care of little details, possibly punching up the color here and there, really assessing are all the disparate components coming together in a unified orchestration, and that takes time. But here's the kicker. Each phase has a beginning and a middle and an end. So in other words, when you're at the end of the beginning, you are getting ready to go into the beginning of the middle. And when you're at the end of the middle phase, you're entering the beginning of the end. Now, this is beautiful, because when I'm working with my students at CCA and they're working on paintings, no matter what, no matter where they are, that's our first question that I have with them when I'm critiquing the painting. I'll say, where are you? And they may answer, one student may answer, well, I think I'm at the beginning of the middle. And I might disagree. I might say, I think you're further along. I think you're at the end of the middle, heading towards the beginning of the end. Or conversely, I might say, I don't think you're in the middle yet. I still think you're at the end of the beginning. So we can have these conversations about where, and of course, all that is mutable depending on what happens. You can be at the end of the middle, let's say, and make a brilliant move, and then all of a sudden catapult yourself towards the end, you see. Yeah. And on the other hand, you could be in the end thinking, oh, I'm just about there, but let me make a bold move, and now you feel like you're back. But I want to say one thing about that. Agnes Martin says, and I love what she has to say on a lot of things. She says, we have this tendency to think in the studio that when everything is going well, everything is beautiful, and we can see straight ahead on the path, that we're moving forward in the work. Okay? Everything's going well, I'm moving forward into the work. Then she says, but we also have a tendency to think that when things don't go well, we're stepping back.
Right.
Like, you know, one step forward, two steps. She says, this is not true. That all the decisions we make, all the moves that we make, whether it's a failure or a success, is a moving forward into the work. And that I love, because we don't want to think that we're stepping back ever. That even our failures, which we learn greatly from because they're painful, even those is a
you learn more from them.
You do, because you don't want to do that again. Yeah. And so but it's always a forward motion, never the side of stepping back, even though it may feel
wonderful. Thanks. I needed that part, because I felt like I just finished, I think I finished 2 fairly large paintings, and they have been such a struggle. They've gone from completely abstract to landscape, back to abstract, back. They tried to be, I think I wanted them to be kind of landscapey. Mm-hmm. And in the end, they're probably not. So many paintings under them, so much time. But at the end, sort of near, I thought I was near the end. I made some big moves and it changed completely, but there's all that history underneath.
Exactly. And I'll help you out with that. Someone once said, Susan, that if you scratch an abstract painting, just below the surface is a landscape.
Oh, really?
Yes. Not a virtual landscape,
right? But
a real landscape. Yeah. You know? Yep. So I think you're working both abstract and landscape, you know, at the same time.
Yes, I am. I think, I am, and because it all they have that, I guess, the feeling for me, right, of a landscape somewhere.
So
good.
This was great.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Yeah, hang in there. Are we talking with someone else? Or?
Yeah, I would like to give maybe an opportunity. We have another 10 minutes or so to see if anyone else wants to chime in, say something, ask something.
And here's Allison. You could talk about the difference between creating history and overworking. I think I have done both many times. So I'm reading from Allison B. Cook. Hi, Allison. There she is. And I'll read here. You can talk about the difference between creating history and overworking. I think I have done both many times. Well, yes. In my last painting, Maria came in here periodically and took photographs to record the procession and the progression of it. And to be quite honest, it was painful because I had a painting at a pretty good stage and I did some stupid things in my estimation. I made some moves that screwed things up. And
there's never screwing things up.
Well, I screwed things up, trust me. And I know that because I was able to look at her history of photographs and realize if I had only paused there at that stage and just made a few moves, I think I would have had a nice painting, but I didn't. I made a stronger move or two and it took a left turn and went somewhere else. So what I want to say about that is that my most successful work is, I believe, when I have taken a risk and it paid off. Regardless of what I lost along the way. I really mean that. And the work that I stand behind the strongest is the work that I struggled a great deal and finally just pulled it off. Did I lose some wonderful moments and passages and things in the process? Yes, a lot. But I am, and I tell this to my students, if we're patient and we persevere and we know that we are just going to keep going on. One of my mentors was Jay DeFeo at Mills College. She worked on one painting, The Rose, for 6 years. One painting, 6 years. Look it up. Jay DeFeo worked on The Rose for 6 years. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to work with her. I knew she knew about struggle. I knew she knew. So I think that taking a risk and losing and being able to lose things is just part of the deal. You know?
Well, if I can say, when Mark starts a painting, I always love his beginnings because they're so very different than the end product.
They're fresh.
And they're usually more quiet and, I don't know, somehow, well, just peaceful, I think, and quiet, even though he's, very physical about it. But when he puts that first layer on the board, it really looks beautiful. And I'm always paying that that beginning disappears. It's just like not there anymore. It's just weird how it morphs from a beginning like that to something really, really different. And when Mark comes to see me in the kitchen and he says, okay, the circus is back, I'm like, oh no. But it's interesting how he needs to begin his painting in one way in order to get where he gets at the end. And it's so different. You would think that he's just putting on and keeping the same energy of the painting, the same vibe and the same way of working, but it's really not.
Yeah.
So just going back to the beginning, which is again today's topic of the conversation, it just, the beginning is very different than the end. Yeah. Very, very different.
I would love to be able to create a body of work that looks like what my work looks like at the beginning phase. And it's very zen, it's very quiet, it's very peaceful. But I have this Midwestern work ethic from Indiana that tells me that I got there too quickly, too soon. And maybe as I get older, perhaps I'm able to just stop there and let it be. But you know, I'm restless that way.
That makes me think of artists that I like Chile, you know, and you would look at his drawings, not the paintings necessarily because they're very layered, but his drawings, or Toulouse-Lautrec, who was one of my favorite painters. And his paintings are so fresh. And he even used to, if he would put what he thought were too many layers on the painting, he would wipe it off and then start again fresh. So his paintings were almost in the beginning, because they're just like, that's it, al prima, whatever I put down, that's it. The line that I draw, that's it. I don't have to look for it, right? Like, I mean, we usually do. Yeah. So that to me, in a way, it's like, is that a painting or a way of painting that is in the beginning, or is it a done deal because I put it down and that's it? That's where I want to stay.
You think about Zen masters with brushwork, or Robert Motherwell, who was able to just take a brush and make a move and say, that's it. I love that.
But that's the beginning and the end altogether.
That's the beginning and the end, the one stroke that says it all. I think that's, you know, it's admirable, but it's not who I am and it's not what I want. I want that journey. I want that history. I want that struggle, because what I end up with are these rich surfaces, but I also end up having this incredible journey, and it's exhausting at the end. I'm not going to get exhausted by a single brushwork that says, there it is. It'll look nice.
But their work is before, because what they do is that they meditate for however long and then just put it out there. And I think that for painters who would paint like that al prima, I mean, that's a lot of observation and a lot of training your mind and your hand to get it out there and be pleased with the result that you got. It's like, okay, that's it. I don't need to move this. So there is a lot of struggle, but it just happens in the background of, not on the painting itself, but it happens somewhere else. So I think that's an interesting.
Well, I think that's why I like to draw. So because drawing is so immediate. So that allows me to be immediate and step back and say, there, that was it. I just can do that. I've got a question here from Allison again. Do you think oil looks overworked more than acrylic? I sometimes do. It's so hard to sand oil, for instance. I don't know, Allison, whether I think that oils look more overworked than acrylic. I do understand that it's difficult to sand back that because of the nature of the beast. But I think overworked is overworked. No matter what, you could be using crayons and it could be overworked. And, you know, each artist has to decide for him or herself if that's the case. Anyone want to jump in terms of talking to us?
Yes, I suppose. Yeah, if you want to jump in, we have another 5 minutes.
Yes, so does anyone want to jump in here?
If you want to share something, although you're sharing a lot, and that's great that you're communicating through the chat window. So I really like that. It also helps us get ideas for the future.
Allison wants to know, where will that recording be?
Yeah, I answered. So we are recording. We'll see how this works. If I can keep it on the computer, if I can have the list of participants, maybe I can upload it and then send you a link. Otherwise, we could also upload this on YouTube, on your channel, and just have it there for people to go through it, even people who were not able to connect. I did get a comment from one of our listeners today that they were trying to connect through the link that we sent through the newsletter, but it didn't work. So she went into Instagram. So there might be people out there who were trying to connect, but the link didn't work. So getting started, this is the learning phase.
Yeah, this is the initial launch.
Yes.
And I would just like to, first of all, thank everyone. We still have a few more minutes, by the way, for being part of this. And I really do look forward to continuing this conversation.
So you want to do it again?
I do want to do it again.
Oh, good. Because he almost pulled.
I almost pulled out. But I'm glad we didn't, or I didn't.
When is the next one?
But I also want to, I also want to know.
We'll do it once a month for sure.
I really am interested in hearing from people suggestions or even critiques about how this can be done differently or even better. So if you're having technical difficulties or anything else, the structure of it, the time frame, just let us know.
Yeah. Maybe Kathleen could give us a
Kathleen could get us a primer. Yeah,
demo.
Absolutely. No,
how to use this thing.
No, it's true. I mean, there's our learning curve. Sorry, guys, getting started. So Allison wants to know when the next one is. Do we know?
So hopefully, next month. We'll do one more in April, that's for sure. Okay. Maybe one in May before we leave. And then we'll
Are we able to do this in Italy?
Away. Because it really depends on the connection. So I cannot promise because we don't know what kind of Wi-Fi we're going to be. We're going to be jumping from one place to the other. And
but it's possible?
It is we can do something. Oh, now he wants to do it.
So
he doesn't want to have the break.
I can see everyone. It's great. So we are going to travel from mid-May to mid-July. We're doing a 10-day workshop in the Umbria region of Italy. By the way, if you know of anyone who would like to join us, there's a few slots left.
Yeah.
And then we're going to be traveling through the south of Italy and Sicily for a while. So we may not be able to do this, but we may be able to do this. My point is, I think this is worthwhile. I really do. Yeah. It's fascinating. To be quite honest with all of you, I really poo-pooed social media, the internet for years and years. Even just getting on Facebook was a big deal for me, let alone Instagram. And but I've come to believe and discover that it has allowed me to meet people from all over the world and to connect. And now I'm able to connect, even though it's virtually, with people in real time. And I find that terribly exciting. So here I am, I drank the Kool-Aid. How about that?
So we'll do more of these. That's for sure. When are you in Italy coming to Florence? Yeah, we will not be going up north.
Yes, Allison, we're going south. From Umbria, we're going to go down to Naples and then down to the heel and eventually over to Sicily. So
yeah.
But next time maybe we're open. We love to travel.
Yeah. Well, anything you want to say to end this beginning?
To end the beginning. No, I think this is the middle of the beginning now. No, I just want to thank people for tuning in.
Thank you guys.
This is a great launch, and I look forward to. Actually, I'm looking forward to getting to know people a little bit. Susan, I never met you, even though it's virtual, but now I get a little sense of who you are, and this is the power of this.
Everyone. This
is really the power of this. So thank you all, and we'll be in touch.
Yes. So we'll be in touch. We'll let you know. Follow the newsletter. Whatever we decide to do next is going to be out there on social media. We'll see what we can do with this video now. We'll learn more. This is going to get better next time, and we'll figure out a date in April to see you again, hopefully. Tell your friends, invite them, and hopefully we'll have more people next time to talk to. We'll also think of a topic, so you can think about it in advance and chime in.
And
so
eventually,
thank you for your patience.
And eventually down the road, we've discussed this being instructional.
Yeah.
So that's
we'll see where it goes.
That's down the road. If it goes there, it could end up being instructional.
We'll combine probably the two, a little bit of instructional and a little bit of, did you learn something today, guys? Just type in. Wow. Do you feel like you got something out of this?
I think there was a real engagement here. Yes. That's what I'm seeing. So
yes, there you go. So that's the whole point. It's learning.
It's the engagement.
A lot of people want to hear what Mark has to say, and 50 years of doing this and experience with this, I'm sure helps a lot of people. And I'm also grateful that you're engaging here and writing things in the chat, because you're also learning from each other. So we're going to try to make it both, a little fun and sharing, and obviously building this community that we love so much.
Yeah.
And we'll also have a little bit of that educational component in it. So we're going to try to do a nice mix of the two. and bring the two together if we can.
And I would add that I'm also looking forward to learning from others. Don't ever think that I am the perennial student, the perennial student. So I'm expecting to learn from others as well.
More instruction, more Kool-Aid, drink more Kool-Aid.
More Kool-Aid.
All right.
Thank you all.
Guys.
Cheers.
I hope you enjoy your drink.
Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.